Morning folks, I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. What we're going to do this morning is we're going to carve a net needle and mesh gauge from natural material. Now of course that's where the flex cut carving jack comes in real handy, because something like that allows you to do fine carving work like a net needle in a very short amount of time. You want to use softer woods for this. We're going to use pine today. We're going to use just our trapline companion knife to make this set. Stay with me and we'll get started. obviously if you had some sandpaper and a carving jack, you know, you could really make this thing look a treat pretty fast and get any rough edges off of it and things like that. But for just a quick something that you're going to make in the bush with a knife, that'll work just fine. It doesn't have to be anything any fancier than that. That'll make a net just fine. The main reason I made this video really was not to recreate something that's already there. Ray Mears has a really good video on how to make a net needle that I've seen on his channel. Not much different than the way I made it. His just looks better. But what I really wanted to do was one of my deliverables at my advanced class that's coming up here in a couple of weeks is for the students to make a net needle out of natural materials, and then they have to make a net. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make a net needle on video like this just to show them exactly what had to be done. And the easiest way to load one of these I found is just to put a loop over the needle, twist it a couple of times down, and then start your wrap, and you just kind of go both directions with that thing. You just kind of push it out and go in, push it out and go in, flip it over every time, push it out, go underneath. So the smoother you get that point in the front, the easier this thing's going to be to load. And the bigger space you've got in there, the more string you're going to be able to load on this dude at one time. And you can see I need to adjust my point just a little bit on the one side to make it easier to load this thing. If I took a little bit off of that point with my carving knife, I'd be in good shape. But it's pretty much as simple as that. And you just keep loading it until she's full, until you get your line all the way up to whatever you want the level to be. But you can run it almost all the way up to the top of this tip if you want to. You just don't want to get too fat with it. And the key is to make your gauge, or your mesh gauge, bigger than your needle, and it's curved here so that you can get a comfortable grip on it while you're making your meshes. And you want this bigger because this is going to be the mesh you're working with, and you want this to be able to go in between the meshes, and it really needs to be smaller than the mesh gauge because of that. So I like to make it about 1/2 to 3/4 the width of my mesh gauge. And remember that your mesh gauge is going to determine how big the holes are in your net times 2. So if you've got a 2.5 inch mesh gauge, you're going to have 5-inch holes in that net, and that's going to determine what size fish you can catch. So around ocean environments and things like that, salt water, you can get away with pretty good size holes in a net because there's pretty good sized fish in there. But in fresh water, where you're trying to make a stop net or net that goes across a creek or something like that you're going to run fish into, you're going to have to keep those meshes pretty small. Alright folks, I appreciate you joining me today for this video on how to make a net needle and mesh gauge from natural materials. I thank you for all your views, all your support, everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for all my instructors, sponsors, affiliates, and friends. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks guys.